did. But I put deodorant on. She's like, no, you just need to change it. I'm like, okay.
That's funny, because I didn't. I went the whole day without a shirt on.
Reason being, you did wear it.
Yep.
We missed out. We had a fun time today.
Reason being, you were at a fundraiser.
You see him going.
Hi.
Maggie, I don't know if I said hi or not.
Oh, that's okay. We're all just kind of in our own little worlds for a
Yeah,
bit.
you get that right.
Okay at Legends, I think.
Did you ever see that movie? What was it, the one where Denzel Washington had to like land the plane upside down or like on the? I think it was he had to land upside down and he saved a bunch of lives, and it turns out
Teed off at 9 and got done at 3.
the previews, the trailers for it make it seem like he's this hero who lands the plane upside down, saving lives on board.
But
Find out though in the standard
Because I was going like
piss
this and
test that he
Ken's
was hammered.
well, like what's wrong with
And he's
computer?
actually, the whole movie is
I
about
missed you guys.
his attorneys.
Oh, you
his
did?
attorneys trying to beat it.
We really did. I heard you had a short.
Ken was
At
upbeat
one
with
point, they need to
epic.
sober him up.
Well,
'cause
I
he's
heard a lot of questions from the audience. I heard that
hardly formed, and so they basically
our
have
one
to
non
go-
be
the
resident
attorney
about
has his
everything that's going
paralegal
on.
go find someone to buy coke, and he does full coke.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. It's 5 o'clock, so we can get in and out of here.
It's a really good movie. It's a good movie. I don't remember what it was called.
All right, we have the proposed budget in front of us for 2024, and are you gonna take the lead on that?
I suppose, unless you want to.
No. Thank you.
Okay, so you should all have the general budget information in front of you. All that we've included are the budget lines or departments that have to do with a tax levy. As we get deeper into the year, we'll get into wastewater and utilities, golf, that sort of thing, but trying to keep things as simple as possible. We'll start with general fund, EDA and debt service. So kind of on page 1 and 2 there, I've got a general summary of what's in there, and I'll just quickly roll through that. If you guys have any questions, stop me. I guess in terms of a tax levy for all funds, right now, as the budget stands, we'd be looking at a 5.3% increase, or $255,667 over last year. Patrick is here. Some notable in that is that our equipment levy did drop to $110,000. This was kind of keeping with the informal policy that we set last year of budgeting $1 million between debt service and the equipment fund, and so that with debt service hitting at about $890 this year, that means for the equipment fund we would have $110 going into that. LGA we are seeing an increase of almost $200,000 in LGA due to legislation passed this last year. And then interest income, we did increase $40,000 up to $50,000 just due to our current fixed income portfolio, as well as the interest we expect our money market accounts to return. So I guess, are there any initial questions? I know like Rick probably looking at this for the first time because his computer's been out. But any revenue questions before I keep going, I guess?
I don't have any.
Okay, rolling into expenses. For personnel, we are looking at, or proposed personnel costs increase of 6.6%. This does project in a 4% COLA plus steps for employees that we expect to get steps. I say that only in that there are some employees who are topped out and so would not be receiving steps otherwise. We do plan for every single employee to receive a step, though that is not always the case. We do have employees who don't receive steps. Generally, if they are not performing well, they're not going to receive a step. And so, but we do plan for all employees to receive steps going into the year. One of the notable changes is that last year, the EDA was paying for half of the new city planner wage. As we looked at it, that didn't seem to make sense because the new planner wasn't doing much work, though myself and Ken were doing a whole lot more EDA work. And so we've kind of adjusted that. We've kept the dollar amount about the same, but we've adjusted my salary allocation out, so the EDA is paying for 30% of that instead of the 1.5% that they were paying. And then we moved the city planner allocation from 50% EDA to 100% planning. So we'll notice quite a bump in the planning salary wages. That would be why. You'll also notice a decrease in the administration wages, and that is one of the reasons. 2024 is a leap year, so there are 2 additional work days that have been included in the budget in terms of salary. It's a minuscule number, but just to make note of it. And with the city paying 65% of the cost of the SRO in 2024, compared to a standard year going forward, which will be 25%, and with budget considerations, I'm recommending the city uses $44,000 of public safety funding that is expected to be received at the end of '23. This came from allocations from the state. The number we'll officially be getting will be certified Friday, I believe, right? The 1st. Until we get that official certification, I'm hesitant to announce what we're expecting to get, because if we don't get that exact number, it'll come back. But I can say it is north of $250,000. That unless something drastic happens, we should get at north of $250,000. You'll see later on that we've recommended a little bit of other spending, but that'll be something that we will sit down and kind of figure out where we'd like to spend that money going forward. And it's a one-time receive.
Josh, is that number in the budget?
That is not in the budget, because we're going to certify it on the 1st, and we'll actually scheduled to get it on the 26th of December. So we will receive it in budget year 2023.
So there is no number for that in these budget numbers?
Correct. So I guess the number that would be in there would be in the revenue, in that we are using funds, existing funds per se, because by the time they get used, they'll be existing, because we're still going to receive those funds in 2023. Does that make sense?
Kinda, sorta. So 44,930 is an example of part of the money that would be used from that. How much other monies are in here? If you
Yes, and
total
so-
them up, do they add up to 250,000?
They do not.
Okay.
So the numbers I think that are in here are level. So the other one I can think of off the top of my head is $25,000 for fire radios. And I know that Tim and I have already been talking about a few ways to spend the money. We're not allowed to spend it until we get it. And so there have been a few things we've thought of that would be nice to have right now, but we just can't do it. So that'll be, like I said, conversations that we have going forward as to this bulk of money and how we would like to use that. But
So if I just kind of go back at you with what you just said, whatever numbers are in the budget, the 44,930 and the other number, whatever they are, they're neutral, because you're just taking out of kind of imaginary pot, so it doesn't affect the levy.
correct, yes, yeah, and then that's why I was making note of that, with budget considerations and trying to keep the levy increase down,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank
So
you.
that number would not be affecting the levy.
Thank you.
And I missed, that was, what did we get? 250 is gonna be
I
certified?
said it's gonna be north of 250.
Oh, north of 250,
It-
sorry.
It actually is gonna be a decent amount north of 250, but I know 250 is safe, that I don't think they're
Okay.
gonna cut it in the next 3 days.
Doesn't wanna tell.
No,
us.
I know.
So don't tell it.
They don't wanna tell us.
I believe that.
The one thing that you passed over really fast is you're gonna, you were paying out of the EDA, you were paying, how much, 1 point?
Yes, so my salary was paid 1.5% out of the EDA, but the EDA was also paying 50% of the city planner wage.
Okay, so
And so we took that city planner wage, moved that all over to planning, and then basically compensated the amount to allocate it to my salary. More or less, the dollar figure comes out to be exactly the same, and it doesn't change the levy at all. It just makes it more transparent as to actual allocation of duties. That way, if someone were to say, why is the city planner working on 50% of EDA when that person doesn't seem to do much with the EDA? They have very much an assisting role, but that assisting role, some months they do a lot, some months they do nothing. And so this way, it just kind of, to me, it seems more transparent as to who's actually doing the EDA work.
right, so anyway, the way you were describing the numbers, it's no longer 50%, it's around 30 to 35%?
So it would be 50% of the city planner wage, about 30% of my wage.
How does it change it from the 50% then?
Well, because
How much more is it or less?
the dollar figure itself is about the same, give or take a couple dollars.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a percentage of the planner wage for that dollar amount is larger than a percentage of my wage. That makes sense.
Yeah, okay, thank you for making that clear. I just didn't wanna see him or the EDA taking a hit off.
Yeah, nope, the EDA budget is basically the same as it was either way.
All right, thank you.
Health insurance, we are in our second year of a 2-year agreement to stick with, Sourcewell, which is kind of a pool that we are part of. And they set a second year max for us at 6.25%. We actually, Robin and I did have a meeting with health insurance today. If we stay on the plan that we were on last year, they are increasing our max 6.25%, which we kind of expected. That's why they've kind of put that in there. That being said, I did ask them to go back and look at some of the other plans that are available to us, whether we're looking at changing deductible, out of pocket, that sort of plan. So hopefully, she said she'd get that information to us by the end of the week, and so I would guess at our next budget meeting, I'll have something that we can discuss as in, this is what we're currently doing and what it costs, these are what some alternatives are, and we can kind of go forward from there. But with the 2-year agreement, we do need to stick with Sourcewell, but they do offer a fair amount of plans through health partners to allow us to be choosy there. Dental insurance, we don't hear on that until the end of September, so we have just included a 10% increase in the budget. Dental insurance does tend to be a smaller number, but it is, we want to make sure that we are covered just in case something crazy goes there. And then life insurance and short-term disability, we are in a 3-year agreement with no rate increase through 25, and so those numbers are pretty well locked in for us. As I said, I guess the big one coming out of there that a lot of people talk about is the 4% COLA. We can talk about that. I've got some graphics a little bit later on that kind of help with that discussion. But I guess outside of COLA, are there any initial questions that come to mind?
Because you talked about the steps before.
Yep.
And I know that was a criticism years ago when we had our last salary survey, that when they looked at it, we really had no history of someone not getting an increase in steps. Mm-hmm. And I believe you also instituted different review forms possibly this year.
Yep.
Have all department heads gotten a review?
Yes, all department heads have gotten a review, and all employees, I believe, have gotten a review. I have to double check that, but.
So when you say some people haven't, it'd be nice to have at least an understanding of how, since we've had that history where we've been criticized. Yep. Is there a way we can get information of how many people actually didn't? Is it 99% that have? Or
yeah, we can definitely look at that. Yeah, we can pull that data together to let you guys know general percentage-wise without revealing.
So in the budget, you're doing 100% people.
Correct. We assume that everyone's performing very well, and then that way. It feels like I could get into legal problems if I was like, hey, I know that Robin's not gonna make it next year, so let's just budget for her to stay where she's at. And
No, I totally agree with that, but yep. I do feel it's a sensitive issue on the other side of it too, where we can get into problems with our salary schedule when we've had a history of not kind of following the step increases where everybody just
Assumes.
There wasn't anyone that didn't get one for years, apparently.
Oh, for sure. And, yeah, so I guess it's just as a real quick overview on how that process works. In December or January, kind of whenever a department head has time for it and can meet with their employees, the way our system works is the department head or the supervisor, really, will sit down with their employee, and the employee will kind of self-evaluate themselves and say, this is what I feel my strengths are, my weaknesses, this is what I'd like to work on, these are some goals I'd like to have. The supervisor will also do the same thing, and then it sits down and becomes a conversation between the two of where do we think we're going, what goals are we trying to set, what do we kind of agree on that could be worked on, and then going from there, we have a mid-year review to say, where are we at? Have we met all our goals? Maybe we had 3 goals and we knocked them all out already and we set another one before the year's out, or maybe we're struggling to even get to those 3. And then by the end of the year, we kind of do a wrap-up review as to, well, how did this year go? And so that whole cycle kind of then will inform steps. And I believe this process does put some ownership back on the employee themselves to kind of, like I said, self-assess. I've been a part of a lot of reviews where it is you just kind of show up, agree with what the person sitting across the desk says, and move on with your life. When it comes down to it, a lot of times employees' goals will differ. And an outstanding employee may have much more high-reaching goals and with city government, it can be difficult sometimes because you're not necessarily in a money-making game or may not have a direct turnover of widgets that you're necessarily creating as an individual. So some of the goals may be based on team play and cooperation and that sort of thing. And if if we'll say we get to an employee's anniversary and they have struggled to meet these same goals that have been set over and over, usually that supervisor, especially if they're not a department head already themselves, will have a conversation with the department head. So-and-so's ex-employee is not performing well. These are the goals we've set. This is the paper trail we've set to kind of follow this, the conversations we've had, the problems we've had. That department head many times will then come talk to me, and we'll put together kind of a 6-month performance where maybe we're not going to give out that step right now because you've been warned 28 times that you need to do this and you're showing up to work late over and over and over again, we'll say. And so over the next 6 months, we're going to track this, and maybe we'd like your attendance to only show up late 5 times, we'll say, over the next 6 months. Well, so in 6 months, if that employee is able to meet that, they are able to then earn that step that they kind of missed out on by improving their performance. If they don't hit that over 6 months, then the step's not earned, and I mean the cycle continues so that they could then get back onto that step again at the next year. So it is a long drawn out process and not one that we're just handing out. I would much rather give employees steps than not give them steps, but at the same time, in my mind, those steps are a way to reward your high performing employees by a way of paying them more than, we'll say, low performing employees within the same scale that you are set as an organization that you feel that job is worth.
I'm sorry. Just to clarify, is it annual year, anniversary year?
What was that?
End of the year.
For what?
For the review process, is it anniversary?
The paperwork itself is calendar year, but these steps happen on anniversaries. And
Thank
so,
you.
it's kind of a continuing conversation. But if an employee doesn't get a step, they should see it coming based off of the last review or two.
Mm-hmm. Does that include police?
Yeah, that's in their contract.
So that you
can be withheld.
Mm-hmm. And can you go backwards even with it?
Can't go backwards.
You can't kick it back up
for the current forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that for right now? Okay, operations and capital. We did see a 7% increase in our property and liability insurance. I think that seems to be just about anyone who has property insurance right now in Minnesota seeing increase with all the hail.
Is that through the league, that insurance?
Yes.
Okay.
Our contribution to the aquatic center, we're seeing a decrease of about $14,000. That is a number that we get from them. And if you look at the kind of year over year, and that is some information I need to get from them, that since COVID in 2020, they have been able to decrease that deficit year over year. So that is the expected decrease budget for this coming year is $14,000 over last year, which I believe it's now like 120 something without going back into the line item sheet later in the packet. And then kind of getting into capital and special projects across the board. Government buildings, of note, we have included $100,000 of capital outlay into that budget for potentially two things. One, either starting to do continued maintenance on City Hall, such as replacing windows, tuck pointing, that sort of thing, or to be put towards a new facility, wherever we end up landing on that. And so that is just money that, even as they were doing the walkthroughs, they said that there is a significant amount of money that, should we choose to stay here, that would need to go into this building. So that would be for that. I mentioned the $25,000 for fire radios coming out of the public safety funds earlier. That is something, talking to the chief, that it's about $100,000 worth of capital investment probably over the next 4 or 5 years. And so this is just kind of taking a bite out of it until we can get all of the radios replaced. I know, I don't know exactly what your radios cost. I know at my previous position, when we were buying them for the ambulance, they were about $5,000 a pop. Or up to 6, so. Building inspector had $10,000 has been included, aging office furniture. And that's really just replacing 30-year-old desks, chairs that are really, really old. That kind of just starts to take a crack out of that side of City Hall. Streets, we've included $12,000 to purchase a stump grinder. That is only a third of that cost. That stump grinder would also be shared with parks and golf, and so it's expected that all 3 departments would kind of chip in $12,000 for that, especially as we continue to have to remove trees. It'll help us to get those stumps out of the ground without having to hire that out. We were expecting to replace a pickup this year at a cost of about $60,000, but speaking with Matt, we think we can get that pushed back a year just to help try to keep the budget levy increase down. But that's definitely a conversation to have, because I know next year we're staring down the pipe of a fire truck, and those are significant. So that is a conversation we can have.
Josh, before you go further, I was talking to a tree removal person, and they mentioned to me that special insurance is needed to operate a stump grinder. So I just FYI, in case it's not covered under our regular liability.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I just want to make note of that.
I know,
Matt,
it was a
maybe you
weird
already
thing,
know.
you know.
The amount of random things that
Yeah,
you
you know.
have to know. So just getting down to parks in the same way that, again, $12,000 for the stump grinder, and then $70,000 to replace a front end loader. It sounds like, talking to Matt, that we haven't had much use of that this summer because it's basically been in the shop. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, it still is.
Yeah, so that's one that I don't think we could push back. Park board, we did carry over $130,000. Initially, that was put into last year's budget for trail connections, and we were going to apply for some grants to help us offset the true costs of those trail connections. We weren't able to receive that grant money, so we put off those actual improvements, and we will be trying again in the future. There may be some policy things that we have to do internally to help us with that, but staff will work on that and bring that back to you, so that maybe to make us more competitive, not only for those grants, but hopefully other trail or natural space type grants in the future. Is there any questions, I guess, on any of that before moving over to professional services?
We're gonna have time to review a lot of this coming up in the next meeting, right?
Yeah.
So that we can go over this.
Yeah, or
I haven't had time because of the computer thing, so I
Yep.
don't even know what we're gonna do with that, so.
yeah, so, yeah, and if you guys have any other questions too, you can certainly reach out to me, and we can go over stuff individually if you wanna hang out. Professional services, technology, with the growing equipment we have around City Hall. I worked with CTS to put together a future planning kind of on replacing equipment, so that way things don't pop up on us out of nowhere. We have had a couple of those over the last couple of years where we told them it would have been nice to have a heads up that you foresee the needing to replace this server, that sort of thing. So they did kind of start with that. And to that end, an additional $42,000 has been included in technology to start replacing equipment. We have 32 laptops and 8 desktops, I think, across the city that's being used right now, something close to that. To replace them all at once, you're looking at $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. And so the idea being that you generally get 4 to 5 years of life out of those before the warranties kind of run out and stuff seems to start to go. So Some might get replaced a little bit early, some might get replaced a little bit late on this first cycle, because they were all purchased with CARES dollars, all at the same time. So all of our equipment is set to come up at the same time, and so hopefully getting them on kind of a schedule of rotation to help minimize any budget spikes year over year.
How long of a schedule are you looking at? I know we talked about this before, and I kind of thought we already started the process, but we've not done any this year, replacements?
We have not done any replacements this year, no.
Okay. I'm sorry, did you say a 3-year cycle, or what cycle were you?
Yep, so we are looking at a 4 to 5 year cycle on, say, like laptops. So the 4 to 5 years actually would get us out to 25, but we're looking at replacing a third of them here next year, a year early. And then, like I told CTS, we will just keep all of our old machines. That way, if for some reason, because we'll have a third to a fourth of them being replaced after their warranty, but by keeping the old machines, it'll hopefully allow us that if anybody just dies, we'll already have existing machines that we can carry through until we can hit the budget cycle. But yeah, I can bring that kind of future planning so you guys can see what the potential future costs of servers and whatnot would be for us. In terms of planning, as we're wrapping up the comp planning process, kind of the next logical step in that is then your development code that really uses your comp plan as a guide. Our comp, as far as I know, speaking with Ken, our code has not been overhauled in decades. I know that's
Not completely.
that's actually pretty common. You'll see a lot of times that the first iteration of a development code was put in like the 60s or 70s, and then stuff's just added to it. So I'm actually recommending a full rewrite. What it does, a lot of times they will start including pictures. They'll get rid of a lot of the attorney language that currently fills them and makes it very readable. So that way, whether it's a developer or a citizen wanting to build a shed, they can look at the code and see exactly what they are and aren't allowed to do. We've gotten informal quotes for this work at around $75,000 at this point to do a full rewrite. And so, again, without spiking our budget this year, I'm recommending putting $40,000 away in '24 and then planning on doing the rewrite in '25 while also budgeting for the remainder of that. And so that has been written into this budget.
When you present for that, when you talk about or bring it forward to present it, for me, I'd appreciate seeing something of what you envision to look like.
Yeah.
Either some other cities or something.
Yep.
To really understand what is the value that we're getting through this work, because maybe 75,000 doesn't seem like a lot when you talk of professional services, but it does occur to me you could hire a full-time person for a whole year.
Correct.
For that kind of money to do that, so.
Yep.
So
And I
when
can
you get to that point, that's the kind of thinking.
Yeah, and I can certainly show you guys. I know my first city planning job out of school, they just have finished a full code rewrite. And then when I went to my second job out of school, they were in a similar boat as us. They hadn't ever done a full rewrite, and it's been piecemealed since I think '73 was when they first put their code in. And even as a professional going into it, it was like my eyes were open because I was having to read a completely foreign document. So I can even send you guys, while we're considering budget stuff, I can send you guys, hey, here's an example. Like, I guess we kind of know what our code looks like, and here's an example of what a rewritten code to make it more readable is. And just like, here's the same code on a rewrited page and a
I'd be interested in
original
knowing
page.
what are the 5 or 6 problems we've had in the last year or two that we won't have by doing this, because just to change the code to make it more technically correct, I would wonder about the value.
I think updating statute would be number one, just because there's been a number of changes over the years that we haven't necessarily tried to keep up, but there's things you miss. On top of that, like Josh said, just trying to make it readable for the general public. There's a lot of legalese in there. A lot of the language dates back to, I think, the 1971 version of the zoning ordinance, which is carried through. It just is in need of that. When I asked our consultant, MSA, that actually is working on the comp plan, they do rewrites of codes too. Obviously, they bring that up when they're working on a comp plan. And it's just outdated and doesn't follow, again, these visual pictures for you know, lay people to look at and get, oh, I understand what they mean by that.
And part of that process too, I mean, coming out of the comp plan, hopefully by that point, city council, staff, everyone will kind of be in the future thought mode. And so a lot of times when you rewrite development code, you also start thinking, okay, what are some of the things that we want to see in this code? Maybe we want to work to get a sidewalk on every street, or sidewalk on both sides of the street. Like maybe we want to increase, I know you guys are, planning commission's already kind of talking about it, but writing in industrial standards for how we want industrial buildings to work. Like that would be the time to kind of holistically kind of approach all of those things while putting it in a more readable format. But yeah, we can certainly come to, we'll continue that conversation since we'll be budgeting money for it, to make sure that, yeah, we all kind of feel comfortable, at least in its early stages, continuing that path down.
I would really, you know, as you're doing it, we tried to do the transportation one. By the time that we had it written, it was obsolete. So
Well, and that's why we'd hire a consultant who would hopefully do it faster for us, since they wouldn't have to be working around their job to get it done, like if we tried to do it in-house.
Yeah, a lot of the bigger cities can usually handle assigning a staff to it for a year or two. That'd be pretty tough for us to do that.
Washington County kind of demanded that cities recodify their comprehensive plan like that, so that, and basically that's what you do. You get a committee together, and the committee just meets every month, and they redo the whole thing in a couple of years.
It'd probably be very similar to how we're handling the comp plan now. I'm guessing there'd be a steering committee, and there'd be meetings with council and open houses and that sort of thing. Kind of the same process. You're just taking the 50-foot view or 50,000-foot view and bringing it down to the ground of the actual boots on the ground, making that comp plan a reality. And then the other one I have in professional services there is, you'll notice our lease equipment did go up by $32,000. This is due to an increase in basically body cam equipment costs. When we originally purchased it, the city paid for an upfront cost of 5 years. Well, I believe here at the end of 23, that 5 years is running out. And we did see an extremely sharp spike in what the charging was. I know, talking about it, we kind of talked about doing a 5-year payment plan instead of just 5 years up front, because there was not a difference in price between paying in full up front or paying over 5 years. And it would have been a significant cost to take on just in a single payment. So, are there any questions about any of those professional services highlights for right now?
No, but Tim, are you gonna be looking at other options besides Exion or whatever it's called?
Axon is what we currently have right now. Part of this price includes our taser devices that we use, our electronic devices. So the issue that we run into is that all these devices are connected on a platform called evidence.com. So everything that records has, everything talks to one another.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start piecing them out, it creates, for lack of a better term, confusion amongst the different devices. Right now, Axon is the only company that has a certified taser for use for law enforcement. So there really are no other options that way. And when you look at stepping away from the body camera and going to a different program, every chief that I've talked to is going to Axon because of the ease of use. So the county attorney's office has an account. They're able to go in when we're done with something and take that, and then they can just grab it instead of downloading CDs and, you know, sending emails and doing those different things. There are some other companies out there, and I think in time, people are gonna start to challenge Axon a little bit and have a little bit more competition, but right now, Axon is kind of paving the way with the technology and what's needed in the law enforcement world for what we need to capture for evidentiary purposes and for our policies and everything else, so.
Does this price include then taser, and what do they do, calibrate them and all that?
Yeah, so this is all-inclusive. We would be all-inclusive for 5 years. So that includes Training, we have to send people to be instructors to do our training in-house, so that includes that, and it would actually include, recently I called them and I said, hey, you have to help us out here a little bit with this sharp increase, so we got some additional licenses, or they said we can have a class, so they're gonna give us 10 credits, so we can then host a class and have an instructor session here, and then whatever we don't use, those would be good for our 5 years, because you have to recertify every 3 years, I believe, as the instructor. Includes cartridges that we would use, any device that goes down, any body camera, any taser device, our recertification rounds that we have to shoot, we're required to shoot so many rounds per year to do that, a training suit, and this also includes a redaction software, which is becoming more and more. When people come in to request a body camera video, there are things that we can give them and things we can't. So it's a very labor-intensive process for us to go through. If Josh would come in and ask for the body camera footage of an incident that he was involved in, there's only certain things that I can give to Josh. So we have to go in and redact all that, both visually and audio. So we have to go in, and it's a very labor-intensive process. So they have a program, it's called Axon Redaction Client, and that cuts down on that labor-intensive process. You can go in and tag a face, and then you can push play, and it will follow that face around, or that license plate, or whatever that may be. So cuts down on that, and that's gonna, those two things are gonna be included at no additional cost.
And then you got body cams, tasers, and, how about dash cams?
They're on a separate plan, so they're
Unaccompanied separate plan.
2 years yet on those.
All right, thank you.
Because they came in at different times,
Correct.
right?
Yep, so it's a 5-year plan, so we got the body cameras and the tasers first, and then 2 years later, we got the in the cars, so. But those are all the same, and those are Axon as well, so if there's 3 officers that go to a call, you can pull all 3 of them up together, and it can all, essentially you can pull all 4 videos up of their body camera and their squad car at the same time.
Who's requesting those?
I'm sorry?
Who's requesting the footage? The people that are involved?
Yeah,
So why would you have to redact anything if they,
because we can't give them anything other than their,
So like if he had someone pulled over and I came walking by and so my face got caught on the camera,
yeah,
my face would then get redacted out, so I'm not seen on the video.
okay.
or if we went to an incident downtown, say Dozinki, I'll give you a disaster of an example, right? So we go to a fight downtown Dozinki, and there's 50 people in the background, and the subject of the call asks for the body camera footage. We have to redact everybody that's not part of that. So if the person making the request, we can only give them their portion of it.
I'm surprised by that, because as
Yeah.
a defendant, you'd want all those witnesses.
Yeah, exactly, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
How do you find out who they are?
Yep, chapter 13.
But a lawyer ultimately could get that footage.
Why could the lawyer get it and other people
A
can't?
judge signs off on it.
Or is it subpoenaed?
Yep.
Okay.
They would subpoena, yep.
Okay.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. That doesn't surprise me.
That's our state.
No, yeah.
I'm just.
Were there any other questions we're on page 3, by the way, Sean?
Yeah, I got that.
Under professional services, I guess, for right now. Debt service, has increased over last year, primarily due to, taking on payments for the 2023 project. I believe it's interest only this year, correct, Robin? I guess other notables, I made a note, we are budgeting for the 2024 election year. It is a presidential.
Oh, I had one on the debt service, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
I'm gonna grill you now, Robin.
Okay,
I told you, didn't Josh tell you?
I'm ready.
Okay. Can we get a graph that shows drop-offs,
Sure.
for, how many we're losing and how many?
We don't have any that we're losing this in
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah, but it'd be nice to have a continuous graph like that. If just, so next year we can maybe, finally a couple fell off or,
Sure.
Something like that. That's all I had.
That was it? That
Yeah.
That was your grilling?
That was my grilling.
That was your one.
That was the first one.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
you didn't even scowl or anything.
Any other debt service questions? Like I said, 2024, before I was rudely interrupted, will be a presidential election year. And
Rude,
so with that, we are having to staff for judges. Now, the state does require staffing for early voting, and Scott County, in all of their goodness, has pushed that back on the cities to do. And so they're no longer I think they are staffing up there, but now we're also staffing down here. We were able to primarily kind of take in-house staff and handle most of that in 2022 and kind of see how that went. We have included staffing, our kind of staffing estimates that we'll need for the 2024 election to hopefully utilize staff where we can, but also understand that there'll be times that we have to have people come in on Saturdays to staff for possible voting.
Saturdays and Sundays.
And Sundays.
And Sundays now.
New law.
Oh, Sundays too.
New law, yep.
Boy. How much money do we get from the state for this?
You don't want to know.
I really do.
0.
Okay.
Southward of 0.
Southward of 0. Okay.
Upwards of $0. Yeah, so going forward, out of the 2024 budget, I'll probably be looking at including some money each year, so that way we're not necessarily election years going like this, but maybe try to level off the election.
I got a question.
Budgeting. Yes.
I know school board is now in sync with, I think they're in sync with the regular elections, like with the city. But
Unless they call a special election.
yeah, so then what happens? Do we even get involved in that?
No,
Or
not
does
for special.
does the school district
So-
handle that all themselves?
Yep, so this year,
Okay.
I don't know
If they
it's-
do a referendum?
If they end up doing a referendum, which I don't know if they formally said yes, they're doing it or not, I haven't followed it closely enough. If they formally say yes, we're doing it, then since we have no election going on this year, we as a city are hands off. They will
Okay.
run their own election, staff their own judges, that sort of thing.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Discretionary expense, we're leaving that at $25,000, which is the same as 2023. And then one thing that we started talking about last year was transitioning the golf club away from their yearly transfer. For the last 12 years, we've been transferring $121,270 to assist with debt service and operations. In the budget, I have a planned transfer of $109,143. And then for the next 10 years, a planned reduction of a little over $12,000 to take place until they're no longer receiving transfers. That's something we kind of talked about a little bit last year. We can certainly revise that, faster down, slower down, not reduce it. But that was something we had discussed last year, the 10-year transfer out. And so that's what I've worked into this year's budget.
I have a little different memory of that.
Yeah.
Consistent with what you're talking about, what the goal is to get it reduced to nothing. But 3 or 4 years ago, I think the golf course was in more challenging times, and we had a history of maybe funding their operating kind of a line of credit in the beginning of the year because there wasn't enough cash from the previous year. They had a loss and history of a loss, so we were kind of funding it internally through the city, and the goal was to try to get away from that. And I think we sometime 3 or 4 years ago we had to come up with a different way, and they didn't have a line of credit in a sense anyway. But the goal was to create enough cash flow, hopefully that they do well enough to create enough cash flow in their budgets that they can self-fund themselves. So their lean time is the beginning of the year, where they have membership money coming in, but not other monies.
Yep.
And they had a great year last year, and I think they had okay years before, I'm trying to remember. But anyway, the cash flow is building, or the cash, and what they should have more cash. And we should be at the point where they should be able to self-fund themselves as far as a line of credit kind of a scenario for the beginning of the year. And I thought that was kind of the discussion as they worked down their principal payments, is this $100-some thousand really was correlated to their debt that they had. The city was kind of paying some of their debt payments in a sense.
And I always heard the debt service too, but I know even over the last few years, their debt has not equaled 121,000.
Right. So, but my point is, I think the point was to get them hopefully in a financial situation they can carry themselves from one year to the next without having to ask the city to fund a line of credit to cover the shortfalls, that they can cover the low periods of the year. And things have, I think, done fairly well over the last few years, that this year, I would think that they should have a sizable amount of cash on hand. I think at the end of last year, they had over 100,000, I think.
I'm not 100%, I would have to look at the audit to see what they had.
But I think the thinking about all that financial part of it, in my mind, was if we can get them to that point, we should be able to drop off that at a much faster clip.
Okay.
So my point is, I don't think we should necessarily just envision a 10-year, because the golf course has had challenges before. The city's written off a lot of money a few years ago, $500,000, I think, or something.
Yep.
So it's the goal is to kind of, in my mind, to make them
Self-sufficient.
exactly. So the sooner we can get them with the financial kind of cash flow and capital on hand, I think we can reduce it, because if we keep funding it, obviously it'll be just part of the budget that they'll rate it in.
And I think it's kind of become that already. I know last year when I had the discussions with them, there were a few golf board members that were real taken aback that we were defunding the golf course, basically, which I tried to explain to them that's not what we're doing here. Like this is not planned, but just as a heads up to you guys, I think any decrease in funding is gonna get pushed back on, at least from golf board members. For that reason, they feel like we fund other city parks, why not fund this one as well?
Well, I'm totally comfortable in trying to
Yep.
just talk about that, because the city has absorbed a lot of losses in some years and written off a sizable amount of money at one time for that. And the golf course has made a lot of money over the years too, so.
And city parks don't have any way to generate revenue, so that's kind of a poor argument.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we can certainly reduce this at a faster clip.
Well, I think when we look at their budget this year, I think we can, and to your point, some people have made the comment, well, they think that the city is paying for their payments. They just assume it. So there's kind of a thinking like the city is making their loan payments. And that's not what the intention was. It was really to help support it, but not necessarily just to start making all their debt payments.
Yep.
But ultimately, when they are unable to be self-sustaining, it still falls back on the city.
It does. Yeah, I mean, if for some reason they got themselves to a point where they weren't self-sustaining, I mean, it's an arm of the city. We're not just gonna chop our arm off, basically. It does kind of fall back on us to pick it back up, correct?
And let's not forget all the equipment that we financed for them
Yeah.
for the last a lot of years. So, yeah,
Well, I'm just asking that once we get further down, there maybe if we could revisit that once they start talking about their budget.
And I believe they were gonna have budget discussions this month, or September here, this coming month, so.
But it's, so far, the performance looks very good this year again.
They seem
so-
to be outperforming last year.
So, their ability to have cash flow and hang on to it, they should have it, and therefore they should have the ability to, we should have the ability to reduce ours.
Or they pay us more, you know?
I'm just glad they're pulling it even. When I first got here, I was like,
Okay.
So other notes that I made on here, on my sheet, we kinda talked about already. Robin and I talked to the health insurance people this morning, hopefully, or this afternoon. Hopefully, by our next budget meeting, or maybe even before then, we'll be able to kind of discuss some various options that we have looking at 2024. And then, Robin and I also had a meeting with the police union here yesterday. And so if it's all right with you guys, I will schedule a closed session after the September 5th meeting, so we can discuss their proposal. So it'd be just after the normal city council meeting, have a closed meeting to discuss the police union proposal. Does that
I'm
work?
good with that, yeah.
And just as note, I'm on vacation that week and out of town, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Kind of going through the rest of the stuff in your packet. Page 4, we included the kind of proposed levies for 2024. That blue bar is the bar that kind of 2024's information here. You can see our general fund levy of a little over 4 million. Debt service, you can see, is increased about $68,000. EDA holding at 75. Equipment levy did reduce $90,000, as I said, to match that levy for $1 million between debt service and equipment levy that we started last year. And then the total increase that I currently have proposed in this budget would be a 5.3% levy increase over last year. Next page, page 5, goes into the tax comparisons what-ifs based on your valuations for your property. It did get kind of small on a single page like this. I think if you've got the PDF document pulled up, it actually would print out to an 11 by 17. If you saw no change in your property taxes or in your property value over last year, you'd be looking at a 1.7% increase from $13.88 to $14.12. I know, looking at my preliminary levy, and this, granted, this number is coming out of Scott County, but it is pretty similar in terms of valuations to LeSueur, because really all you're looking at is your change in valuation. Like myself, I would be in the line. I saw a 3.7% increase, or preliminarily for next year, so I would be in the line right above that. If this levy were to pass, my city taxes would be looking at going up about 4.5% over last year. Does that make sense? Does the paper make sense? Are there any questions about either of those two sheets as we continue to walk through stuff here?
Where are we on the LeSueur County side?
In terms of?
Just in terms of, do we have any information?
I mean, I guess, so in terms of general data, actually, it's coming up here in a page 2, or page 7, has the general increases over both LeSueur and the other side.
Oh, that's how it is. I see.
So if you look at estimated tax capacity for residential on LeSueur, so LeSueur is the blue on there. Net tax capacity is your middle one there. Gross net tax capacity. Generally in LeSueur for residential, they're looking at about a 5.1% increase across the board. Now, you'll have some properties that go up, some that go down. Like I mentioned, when I got my preliminary tax statement, whenever that came out here, mine was looking at roughly a 3.7% increase or something like that from last year. So that's something that if you haven't gotten the mail already, you can go actually online, I believe. You can pull up your property and see what your estimated increase is for next year. I believe you can do that on Scott County side too. Correct, Ken? So, yes, so
I have to do that.
just real quick, page 6 does a whole, just general of all the departments for the line items that, in terms of what our actual was for 22, what our adopted is for 23, and what the budget currently contains for 24, without getting into individual line items, so you can see kind of how the changes have happened there. Generally, in terms of expenditures across the board with the general fund, you will notice that General fund expenditures are generally down, is what we're expecting. As I mentioned, page 7 kind of breaks down property tax information that's all information that I received on right around August 10th from both Scott and LeSueur County to kind of put that together, as well as a change. Of note on page 7, there has been a change of, and when you look at just general changes, residential property values are take up less of the pie than they did last year. Scott County generally kept their residentially moved down on a lot of people. And I don't know if you on the Scott County side saw that. Maybe you saw your valuations drop. Us on the LeSueur side saw ours go up. But commercial values increased about 25% within the city over last year, or capacity-wise. But yeah.
Are you in the sewer, Josh, or Scott?
Sewer.
I live like a block from you.
Oh, okay, so, okay,
Yeah, I'm in LeSueur.
okay. I thought you said Scott earlier, that's why I asked. When you were giving your comparison. I was like,
Yeah, nope, I'm in LeSueur County. Page 8, I gave a general breakdown because I know this has been a conversation we've had the last couple years of how COLA has tracked with inflation. This one gets a little small as well. If you're able to pull up a digital copy, it does get a little bit larger for you. Generally, this kind of everything that I learned in the many statistics classes that I had to take throughout school really came out reflected in this, in that you can make data say just about whatever you want it to say. If you pull out over a 10-year time period, if you took the growth of $20 per hour over 10 years, you'll see in that first graph that New Prague actually kind of out-tracked inflation across the U.S., inflation across the Midwest, and the Social Security living adjustments. And it wasn't only until the last couple years, 21, 22, and 23, that they kind of started catching back up again. That being said, if you take over the last 5 years, those same 3 metrics have outpaced the COLAs for the city. I don't know if it gives a definitive we've outpaced them, we haven't outpaced them, we really, how far back you want to look. I didn't go back 15 or 20 years, but it would be interesting even to see what that data would say if you keep going back. As I mentioned, for right now, there's a proposed COLA increase of 4% within the budget. The expected COLA right now, from the last data I was able to find on the Social Security website, is about 3% is what their prediction is coming out for Social Security. If you look at current year-to-date CPI across the U.S., it's about 3% from January through July, and the Midwest is about 3.5%. So that is there to help kind of guide that discussion.
Are you still on page 9?
I am
No.
on page 8.
He was on page 8. One page before.
There's some data at the top.
There.
That makes sense.
With, 2 graphs there. Of note, that is just COLAs that have been given. That does not include steps or comp studies. Trying to look at it, I've been digging through our comp study here, and it would be, we need to discuss how we want to try to get that data together. Because when that comp study went out, we had positions that were changing pay grades. We had positions that we had grades added on, it looks like, from our old scale. We had some positions move up or down a pay grade or 2. We had some positions that didn't move at all. And so the parameters of how to put a comp study into this sort of data seemed very tough. I also didn't include, and also with comp studies, to me, and maybe this is a discussion we also need to have, when a comp study is done, you're doing the comp study to attempt to compare yourself to surrounding, we'll say your market competitors, not necessarily how have you adjusted versus the cost of living over so many years. I mean, it may be a part of it, but you're also saying, hey, what is Elko New Market paying? Hey, what is, we'll say, Prior Lake paying? And where do we want to fall within them? I know, like, I think Elko and Shakopee do quite a few comp studies, like every few years, and they're always talking about our city council wants us to land within 60%, like at 50% normal, our city council wants to land at 60%, or our city council wants to land at 50%, that sort of thing. So to me, when I was looking at this, I was looking at just the wage growth tracked versus inflation, how that salary is moving with inflation. Is the cost, is what you're getting for $20 an hour still tracking the buying power? Dwayne's looking at me really confused.
No,
Maybe
I'm
not
listening,
explaining
I'm
it
just
well.
listening intently.
Okay, so the comp study to me is not trying to track that versus inflation, and is more trying to get yourself, how do you compare with who you consider your competitors to be? I didn't include steps in this because as I view steps are there, and we've already kind of talked about this, Bruce had mentioned it, hasn't always been this way, and maybe I view it differently than prior administration, but I view steps as a way of paying higher performing employees their worth versus, we'll say, lower performing employees. Not to, hopefully that doesn't get taken out of context by anybody who might listen back to this. So your higher performing employees are naturally going to make higher salaries than your lower performing employees, and that doesn't necessarily track with how that $20 an hour, the buying power of that $20 an hour. That person may naturally make $25 an hour because they're a higher performing employee versus the $20 an hour. So they may rise up more quickly through the ranks, which is why for this particular one, I only tried to look at our cost of living versus inflation, since in my mind, the cost of living really should be tracking and trying to follow that inflation rate to make the buying power of your salary the same as it was this year and last year.
The steps should be a reward.
Yeah, I mean, the steps are more of a, you're a great employee, you are worth more money than what you made last year.
Yeah.
But what is the step percentage of employees that get it? It's like 98%.
I mean, it's fairly, to this point, it's been fairly high. I know we discussed, I mean, this year we've implemented a review system that will hopefully hold more employees accountable and not just hand out steps as they come, but ensure that employees who receive them earn them, and employees who don't receive them understand why they didn't and how they can get to that next step.
I appreciate you putting this together. I think it's helpful to me anymore, and I think in some ways, I think it's helpful that other people see it so we can have a talking point. And
Yep.
when we come each year and say, well, we're going to do 3%, it always seems to be 3%. And there's no discussion about it. There's no really what's it based on the foundation of it. So at least if we see some things, at least maybe future councils or whoever can have some touch point as far as how they're looking at it. I emailed and you replied. The other part of this, I think that's valuable, is to really understand, have a ongoing understanding of what is our personnel cost going over time. And I think that's what this other handout was kind of addressing, maybe.
Yes, and so, yep.
Because working in the private sector and then coming into the public, it's so much different as far as your ability to manage personnel cost, the ability to move people around and vary their structures and incentives and things like that is different. So in some ways, I think the city is much more limited in how they can manage because they really have to either reduce staff, slow the hiring of staff if they're trying to manage overall costs, or reduce some work or close a park or lay people off. You know, the ability to change salaries and say, well, I'm going to give you an incentive instead of increasing your salary, that isn't available to the city. You have less tools in that way. So to me, you're limited to how you can manage that increase from year to year in the whole picture. And I would like to see that it kind of flows well with the growth of the city and the growth of the overall, income of the city, so we don't end up, so we keep an eye on it, because some of the other alternatives are not good, like laying people off.
Correct.
And, you know, I've never wanted to lay people off and fought for that kind of thing, so we had to do that, you know, a couple years ago, so. And that's why we want to be very competitive and be able to have the ability to recruit people, but at the same time, keep an eye on our overall cost. And what are we going to do if this grows? Like, I think in this plan, we're looking at growing at 11.5%, it looks like, in overall labor increases. So, that's a handout thing, I think.
Oh, looking at this.
So, those are the kind of things to watch that over time, and I think maybe there's a typo, because it looks like a 62% increase from 2018 to 2019.
So if you remember right, when I emailed you back, I said there were some weird discrepancies in the data that we were trying to figure out why.
Oh, that's it. That's the
If you look at both so in the extra sheet that I put up on your desk, it breaks down full-time equivalents by looking at total hours worked across the city for that year, and then dividing that by 2080, which would be a full-time employee, and then taking total expenditures on labor and dividing that labor into those employees. So if you look in 2015, it looks like our labor expenditures, according to our books, dropped off over $1 million, and then rose again in 2016. And the same thing happened again in 2019. And so that's something that Robin and I have just been digging, trying to figure out why. Like, what caused that drop? And there's some different accounting measures that could have happened. We just needed to dig further into the data and figure out why our system is spitting that back out at us.
So then, I think that, from my mind anyway, the value in looking at some of the bigger dollar numbers and total personnel costs, it does include the steps and people transitioning from leaving you to hires and the whole big picture. So are we on the track as other cities our size, or other cities growing our speed and that kind of thing? Because it really helps in the hiring or not hiring thing. And sometimes I've heard challenges or people maybe complaining, why are we not hiring people? Well, I kind of understand in some ways, because cities, that's one of their only tools to manage that overall cost sometimes, is delay hiring, because you're not going to terminate people and you're not going to lay people off typically.
Yep.
But a private sector would.
And some of that we've started trying to do. As you may recall, we did recently hire a 3/4 position, as we realized that with technology efficiencies, we could reduce the hours that we paid out on one of our police record staff. We've also, with technology efficiencies, we're realizing in the finance/utilities office, we were able to basically reclass a person into doing more utilities work without having to hire another employee for the utilities department like they were expecting they may need. So basically, for the cost of a grade step and a reallocation of work, we were able to save both the general fund and the utilities money going forward in that aspect. And so I agree. I mean, labor is the dominant part of our budget.
Is this a good number then? 3.9 million on 2022 and 3.5 in 2021?
Yes.
So that's about 11.5% increase from year to year.
From those years. I'm trying to remember what may have happened from, I think we brought on 2 employees in 22. That was also, 21 was the year the comp study was put into place. And so there were probably a number of employees who were topped out and not receiving steps that suddenly got steps that they hadn't before.
Right.
And so I would expect that number will come back now in 23. And as if you look at there, we're expecting about a 6.5% increase in labor costs for 24.
Yeah.
With the current proposal.
And that, I guess the next comment I was going to make is more like philosophical about the balance between the cost of living and the steps. Here again, it's a different world to me, but when we did the salary study, some of the challenges or the complaints that I heard in the past were that we have all these employees that are very seasoned, experienced, and valuable employees, but they really weren't getting anything, and that was the argument behind increasing our steps from, I think we went from 7 or 8 to 11 or something.
We're at 11.
And that was to really capture it, and that for that one golden year, everyone was on this schedule. And now I think we're probably have maybe 1 or 2 that already passed the 11 years now.
I believe we've got more than that.
that.
We've got a number that we'll say topped out, had hit
Yeah.
step 11, so there's no going
Yeah.
higher. And I do know, speaking with various other entities and or we can go into this farther with union stuff. I know the 11 steps that we as a city give are abnormally high. Most cities tend to land between, say, 5 and 7, probably, and we're at 11. And I know reading the comp study, it looked like there was even a talk of adding a 12th, 13th, and 14th step. And I was not here for the conversations, but I know if you read the comp study, those bonus steps per se are in there. And I don't know if where that conversation ever went, since I wasn't here, but.
Part of that was the challenge with the utility company and electrical linemen. And the challenge with all that was that we have unique positions that kind of outliers that the marketplace says they're really worth this. They don't really fit the schedule as well. And that was part of that, why there was that discussion about the extra. It was really driven from the utilities.
We have 13 people out of 58
So
maxed out.
13 people, I guess, at this point are at step 11 and aren't going any higher.
So I guess that just brings me back to the cost of living versus steps kind of discussion. And can we talk about weighting it differently? If we have that many people off the schedule, maybe we should weight it so the people that are off the schedule get a greater benefit than just the steps, or the people that get the opportunity for steps.
I mean, we can certainly look into, I can tell you that I am not a payroll professional by any means, and I think we'd want to bring somebody in who may understand that world a little bit better than I do. Whether we do a comp study or something like that, to look at potentially a different, I know even reading through the 21 study, it talked about there was potential for going to more of a pay for performance model, but at that time it would require a drastic change in the review process to try to make that a more fair process for all employees and ensure fairness.
But isn't that kind of what you were talking about that you implemented?
A little bit, a
we
little
didn't
bit at
wanna
the same
call it
time. I mean,
that,
it's kind of utilizing the system we have now and trying to implement a review system into it to take advantage of it that way. Yes.
Yeah, and
But
you
yeah,
might need,
a pay per performance model, I believe, would basically eliminate steps. Like steps would kind of disappear, and it would be more, your movement would be based off of your performance.
Correct.
So you may, in 1 year, in theory, a brand new employee comes in and is so valuable, you basically say, we got to pay this person the top. Like they're worth everything, and someone who's been here a long time may never get off the bottom.
Yeah, because, it gives you more of a range versus a step. Pay for performance.
Correct.
so Bruce, when you said that those that are topped out, and they're not going to get into another step, was your thought that their COLA could be different than the COLA for other employees that are still getting their steps?
No, it was more the one versus the other and the weighting of the two. When the salaries thing was done, I remember the conversation and the justification, or maybe that's not the right word, but the thinking behind steps, and I'm no expert because that's not my world, but was that you're hired and you gain education and you get training, and therefore your training makes you more valuable, therefore you get another step. It's all about educating, experience, and that type of thing. What Josh has implemented and talked about wasn't really what was talked about then. He's talking about more performance goals, and if you
Right.
achieve this, then you get the step kind of thing.
Right.
That's not how it was described when I remember talking about it, so it's different.
More of an automatic.
Yeah, and it was so automatic that it was like, okay, this isn't really a valuable system, and you guys are just gaming it. Is what I heard that person tell us. So, to me, as an example, I would probably support a 4% more likely if we would shave the steps lower. because the cost of living goes to everybody, all those 14 people that are past the steps. Whereas the steps, you know, the weighting, I would look at differently.
Gotcha, okay.
And I don't know how many times we've changed the steps since I've been here, maybe just once or twice.
Just with that comp study that I'm aware of.
I mean, I guess I know looking back, even before the comp study, it looked like basically between steps, at least as far back as I looked, which is like 2015, between steps is 2.75%. And so if you go from step 1 to step 2, it's a 2.75% increase on your salary. And
Then if there was a COLA,
then the COLA basically takes that range and just bumps it 2, 3, 4%, whatever that is.
Yeah, I thought it was 2.5 at one time, but maybe I'm confused in that, but, so you're getting that portion of the employee base is getting budget 6.75%.
Yeah, so yeah, in theory, that cost of living, like I've said, should be tracking with inflation, so your step 1 is worth the same amount as it was the year prior, because everything in theory has gone up 2% or 3%, whatever you raise the cost of living. And then if they get their step, they're then getting a true raise over what the worth of their purchasing power was the year before.
That's a word I've never heard in my 30-some years of work, is a true raise. But a raise was a raise. What I got and what our employees got, and they appreciated it that way as well. But so that's why this is a different public sphere when you talk
Yes,
about
it is.
that.
Yes, it is.
If people are looking at cost of living differently, then
And I guess my purchasing power true raise is probably coming from my more economics background, where they talked about what's a dollar worth this year versus what's a dollar worth last year.
yeah, we can never be fair about that because everyone's cost of living is different and
No,
everyone's different. And we're talking about income, which is the big picture, and their expenses is a portion, hopefully, of their income.
Yep.
And that's what's going on at the inflation rate. You don't have to have the same increase to still have the same cost or the same
True.
living
Yep,
standards, basically. So we don't want to get too lost in the cost of living index, but it's a good touch point. But anyway, I think when it gets further into it, and I know we had the conversation last year, which ended up towards the end of the budget process, and I was hoping that we just kind of resolve some of this stuff before we get to November and December, and not talk about changing it, but I would be interested in talking about reducing the steps and having
When you say reducing steps, do you mean taking it from like 11 to 8, or do you mean
2.75 to 2.5
Oh,
or 2
reducing
and
the
a quarter
size
or
of this,
something like
okay.
that. Because if you look at it I don't look at it as, well, that's my raise. Because then you're telling people that are past the thing, they have no raise. That doesn't, I wouldn't look at that way. I don't think the normal person that I gave raises to.
I mean, I guess that was explained to me at a previous job of this is what the city is willing to pay for someone to do this job. And once you get to the top, we'd love to pay you more, but this is what we're willing to pay. And so that cost of living, will adjust that year to year based on inflation, but to get a raise within that, we'd like to give it to you. This is what we're willing to pay for that job. So yes, in theory, once you get to the top, we're kind of done giving you raises unless you're going to reclass into a different position, or the city is going to find that position to be more valuable in terms of income or pay role we're willing to pay out.
Yeah, there's inequities in that, no matter how you do it. There's people that are moving up the steps, so we could hire someone, in some cases, at a lower thing. There's arguments on both sides of that, but anyway, I don't want to beat that to death, but the revisiting the step, in addition to looking at the 4% or whatever number we choose or decide upon, is.
And I guess I would recommend, if we move anything on that, knowing about the pay equity laws in Minnesota, like I would recommend that we have somebody come in that knows those laws better than we do to work on those.
the last thing
We're not talking about changing the schedule.
Yeah.
It's the steps. and the step is a fixed number across
Well,
all steps.
Yeah, if you take that 2.75, you're gonna reduce
Yeah.
what the top end of that salary range is, I guess, as everything kind of comes back, if that
Yep.
makes sense.
It doesn't reduce it, it just reduces, it reduces the next year's what it could have been, but it doesn't change anybody's this year.
No, it doesn't change anything, but let's say you've got 11 steps at 2.75 and you've got someone at step 11. If you reduce that salary range by 0.25 for every step, you're basically pushing, and it depends on where you pull it. Are you reducing it and pulling everything up, or are you reducing and pushing everything back? Because something's gotta move.
But you're not reducing
salary range.
anything, you're not reducing anything. You're just not increasing it as much as you did the previous year.
No, I get that, but those steps, so, do we have that in here? Is the pay matrix in here?
And maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but we've changed it before and not had to have a person come in, but
I guess I'm trying to envision, it. So if the current range we'll say is $20 an hour, and I know this math isn't gonna be correct, but we'll say $20 an hour, and over the next 11 steps, you have 2.75% between each steps, and we'll just say the top end gets to 30 for easy math. So if that's the range for this position, and we decide, you know what, we're gonna change those steps. We're gonna put 2.5% between the steps instead of 2.75. To make that range work, either you have to raise that $20 to like $21, that way you can fit in 2.5 over 11 steps, or take that $30 and reduce it to 29, that way you can have the 2.5 between each steps. And so either you're picking up the bottom end, or you're pushing down's not the right word, but you're pushing down the top end. That way that range is still a range of 11 steps. Now it just has 2.5 between the steps instead of 2.75.
And you wanna make sure that we're in compliance.
Well, and I'm just saying that is not my area of expertise,
Yeah.
and so there's
nor
probably
nor is
something I'm
mine,
not
and
thinking.
you might be totally right, and I don't wanna, because I'm no expert at it, but I just felt that we had changed in the past without a lot of issue. Either, I can't remember if it was down or up.
And I mean, and some of that is, I'm sure we've changed in the past that, I mean, we can reclass anybody. We can go into their job description and say, hey, this is the work I do. According to our current comp study model, you are currently grade 11, but we can move your position to grade 12, which is actually a little bit higher, or maybe is a new position. So we're hiring someone, we're gonna push that down to grade 9, because they don't do quite the work that we originally had them doing. So we are reclassing the position itself within a grade of how it falls in that giant matrix of stuff. But to change the distance between steps affects the whole grid in one direction or the other. If you push the top down, if you could have employees who are topped out who are now getting paid more than what is on the matrix. Or if you push it up, then you're taking all the step 1 employees and basically giving them an automatic raise to get to that. But
Well, I think maybe you can research that and let me know what it is, but I was trying to get at the issue that we had years ago when we have employees that were disheartened because the steps were, people in the steps seemed to
and I know that
get more love out of us than the people at the end. They were saying,
at the position I had in Colorado, their salaries were basically set up as to everyone got 3% every year regardless of what happened. That was just what you got. This is the range. You got 3% that built up to that range. If the city did a salary adjustment, they figured out that maybe you were on, say, 20% out of that 100%, and so you just got adjusted with it. But over time, your 3% would work your way up. For the employees that topped out, I think what they did is they more or less got a 1.5% longevity pay, or whatever you may call it, at the end of the year. That way, it didn't add to their salary structure, but it was a money on top. So
It was lump sum.
it was lump sum at the end of the year. That then didn't count towards their salary next year. They were still making the same thing, but then at the end of the year, they'd get another just lump sum bump. So their salary would never go up unless you adjusted the whole salary range, but they'd get a little something on the top end.
well, thank you for all that, and thanks for the information that you provided. I don't want to,
It would be nice to check that, because every year we'd have that same discussion.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look into it and see what we can find based on that stuff.
Okay, what page are we on now?
Page 9.
Okay,
I'm sorry, since I'm muddying the water so much, but,
Stir it up.
the Juneteenth holiday,
Yes.
are we,
We are on now.
have to.
That is a
so are
state
we
holiday.
changing our personnel policy to add it as another official holiday for people, or?
Have we officially put that in the policy yet? It will be on the holiday calendar for next year. Because
Do we have any choice in it?
I thought, no, we don't have a choice,
We
but I
don't
thought
have
you
a-
got it this year.
we
We
did get it
had
this
to.
year. I don't know if we formally updated it to include it on the list in the, we haven't yet.
So have we increased the number of holidays that employees receive? Don't we have a, floating one?
We have, so the way it reads is 3 holidays, and I believe it's President's Day, MLK Day, and Columbus Day. No, yes, are the 3 days. We have to provide all 3 of them, but we can take one of them and provide it on the day after Thanksgiving instead. So there's 4 possible days to provide: MLK Day, President's Day, Columbus Day, day after Thanksgiving. We have to do 3 out of the 4 of them. So that's that floating holiday that
Day
you're
after
talking about.
Thanksgiving is a required holiday?
No.
Those three are required, but you can take one of the 3 and move it to the day after Thanksgiving if you
So for
wish.
example, in the county, what we did was we worked Columbus Day. And then we had the day after Thanksgiving.
And that's how we do it here too. So we take MLK Day and President's Day. We just move Columbus Day to the day after Thanksgiving.
So there's no floating holiday that employees
Well,
can?
yeah, so we also, as a city, I guess, have provided a floating holiday for
Yeah, we added
employees
that
to,
10+ years ago.
yeah, take whenever they wish. They've got to take it in bulk. You can't take half
Yeah,
of it, but,
correct.
Well, I would just ask you to look into it, so if it is an official thing, we change the personnel policy to address it and not using up the floating holiday for that.
yeah.
I don't know if that's an option.
No, it is,
I'm not
yeah.
advocating it,
It would just,
but we could take away the floating holiday and give them that one, right?
yes, in theory you could.
I'm not advocating it, and I shouldn't have said it out loud, but I'm just saying,
yeah,
if we could true up our personnel policy.
So yes, the floating holiday is not state required. It's something, sounds like 10+ years ago.
That was
someone
in
gave to employees.
yeah, that came out with a comp study, and we had to raise the.
So now it's 12 paid holidays, right? Or 13,
12 including the floating, but
Oh.
13 including
the floating
the,
Juneteenth.
and the Juneteenth, that's what I meant.
13, what a great number.
so
Lucky
we'll have
13.
updates though this January, cause we'll have the ESS outlet.
I'm
So
sorry.
kind of looking for that January
No, that's
every
right.
year.
We got plenty of time to talk about it.
Yep.
Yeah, so, we will be updating the policy this, coming year because we do have other state, mandates coming down, such as the sick leave,
yes.
requirements that will be coming down from the state. So we have to get those worked into our personnel policy, and kind of how we'll go forward from there. Page 9, just kind of a graph looking at the rolling average of, levy changes year to year and the proposed 5.3 on the back end.
So is that what we got for the levy this year?
That is the proposal that's currently in the packet, yes,
So
5.3.
that's what we're gonna set our preliminary at.
That would be up to you guys as to where we would like to set that at, whether we want to do 5.3, whether we want to go lower, whether we want to go higher.
Well, if we go like that, we can go lower later.
We can always go
That's
later,
what
we
I'm
cannot go higher.
Yeah.
If for some reason you want a little fudge room, I would say set it at like 6%. That way, if something pops up on us with no intention of using the 6%, but if something comes down the pipe where we need to come up with $50,000 because a truck breaks and we just have to buy it, that would allow that fudge room.
Okay.
Page 10 is just kind of looking at how the levies are spread out across the various funds. As you can see, really, it's been the general fund that has seen the bulk of growth over the last 10 years. Net tax capacity on page 11, just kind of showing the tax capacity of the city. This speaks to both growth of the city and the value of the property according to the assessor who does our property values. Page 12 looks at the tax rate, so that would be the amount of taxes we are levying versus the overall tax capacity. As you can see, over the last 10 years, we've had a general downward trend trajectory with a slight uptick in 22. And then if we do the proposal as it is written now, it would be a slight uptick over last year in 23. Of note, 23 did drop off quite a bit, and that's when everyone's property value went up like 20%, according to the county, and so naturally the tax rate drops significantly. In fact, almost 20%. So, are there any questions of the general overview at this point?
No, I could figure it out. I thought that was a plus.
So I would like to, as we move forward in the coming years, get more into almost telling a story a little bit through this, so it becomes like a 10, 15 page kind of explaining pages as you go through, so that in theory, if we didn't have this meeting, you would all understand what's in the budget type of situation without having to be explained. To Rick's point, I guess the next question is now, are there any immediate changes that you guys would like to see, or would we like to discuss what you would potentially like to set as a preliminary levy for the second September meeting?
September
18th. Is that what it is?
I guess I took the 5 point whatever as your recommendation.
And yeah, I mean, when we so like I said, generally my rule of thumb would be to create a budget and then set the preliminary a little high, knowing that we can't go up on it. But you're going into it setting it higher than what you intend it to be.
No, understand.
So the 5.3 is my actual recommendation for the budget. The preliminary, like I said, I recommend setting a little bit high on my point part, 6 or 7%, with no actual intention of ever going that high. But that would be up to you guys.
You know, that's gotta be within reason. You can't just say, hey, we'll go 9% and then later on cut it down to 3.
Well, yeah, I mean, if we knew that we were going to hit a 3, I'd say set it at 4 or 5 type of situation.
We did before. I don't know, guys, that don't seem like an off number too much to me.
Thoughts?
What number?
The one,
6%?
6%.
6%?
you wanna go 6% or the 5 point, why would you rate 5 point?
I wrote 5.3 because that is my recommended budget at this point.
That's a calculation.
That is the calculation off of the various spending recommendations that I have. Like I said, but that takes everything into account of all the information we have now. That doesn't have surprises built into it, I guess, per se. If we had a surprise that came at us in January, then we're just having to figure out what isn't happening. But
For example, our dental insurance renewal that's coming at the end of September.
That
It
could be
leaves some-
lower.
What's that?
That could be lower.
could be lower
Or
It could
higher.
be lower,
or
absolutely.
higher.
Or
But
higher.
if it was a surprise and we had to, whether it's look for different coverage or accept a bid that's higher, usually it's not gonna impact us that much, but those are just the examples of work that hasn't been completed yet.
Yeah, cause you're waiting on stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
No, I'd say the 5.3 and then after it's passed and we do everything we can to work it down.
When does it have to be determined?
The end of
September 30th.
Oh. So we don't need to decide it today.
We don't need to decide today, but, the idea of, are we coming back for another budget meeting before the second meeting in September? Generally the second meeting in September, which at this month would be September 18th, would be our setting the preliminary levy at that point. And so we don't have to decide today, but it would give us direction unless we want to come back for a second budget meeting before then.
Well, I think it's important to come back for a second budget meeting, just to be able to, because over the weekend, I can't digest all of this, so.
Have those other numbers, do you suspect?
Well,
Like from Delta Dental and.
that'll be, we've been told end of September.
Oh, end of September.
My general thought was the second meeting would happen early in October. I'm not saying not to have other meetings, I just didn't know if we wanted to
Yeah.
squeeze more meetings in between now and then. I would expect that we'll have 3 or 4 budget meetings before the end.
For the final.
We don't have to set it at a council meeting though, do we? Can't we set it at a budget
I
meeting?
mean,
Have a quorum?
it has to be a council meeting, but it could be a special meeting.
Well,
We could
this
call-
is
we
a
could- we-
special
we
meeting.
could call a special meeting if we advertise that the intent is to set the, preliminary levy. So, yeah, we could meet on like the 29th if we advertise that that's why we're meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I don't care if we set it at 5.3 or 6. I mean, it's gonna, hopefully, we're gonna knock it down and see where the numbers fall, but I mean, we could certainly give, Maggie wants some time to look at it, I'd like to look at it. I didn't even
And
know
by
that
the
was
way,
a
everybody, my
that you
computer's
missed the
down,
last council.
so I don't see any of this stuff coming up, so.
Yeah, your computer was
And then maybe by then, we'll have some of the insurance quotes, maybe if we're lucky, so maybe push Delta Dental to say, we're in the throes of our budget, we can't wait until the end of the month, so.
I guess we can try. I mean,
Yeah.
I would imagine that every city is in the exact same boat we are.
It's
So,
their typical time, that's when we got it, like in the previous years as well. I mean, we can ask, I'm not sure that they'll.
Or if they even just can give us a range, a percentage range of if it's gonna go up or down. I'm sure their actuaries are working on it now, because I'm in the business and we're already quoting 2024.
so I guess, do we want to set our next budget meeting then?
I would be good with that.
Right now, or do we want to wait until the September meeting? I guess it's like in a week to
Do
set
you
our
feel
next.
it could be taken in a city council meeting, a normal city council meeting?
What was that?
Could it take place in a normal city council meeting?
I mean, we could if you guys would like to.
Yeah, I just sense that there's not a lot of question.
Not yet, not yet. But Bruce, I haven't had a chance to go through this,
I haven't either, this is my first view of it.
And, but thank you for providing it earlier, because I was able to go through some of this, but it's just getting into the detail. And now that I've got paper, it's gonna make it a lot easier.
Yeah, right.
So,
Any ideas when you wanna meet then?
Should we just wait until September 5th that the city council meeting to set it then?
I would,
Or, yeah, do it then, after you've had time to digest it.
yeah, I won't be here on the 5th.
Oh, you
Oh,
won't
that's
be
right.
here on the
No.
5th, that's right.
And I guess maybe, do we want to do it September 5th and I can get some dates from you and we can try to line those up then on the 5th with what
Well,
works?
why don't we just do it at the next council meeting, not the 5th, but then,
The 18th
Oh, just talk about it at the council meeting?
or before?
That's when we were looking to set the preliminary levy was on the 18th.
On the
Unless we
18th,
do a
yeah.
special meeting.
Yeah.
How,
I get it.
do you have any indication how big the packet will be on the 18th? Is there anything really pressing?
Not at this point. I mean, I don't think it's gonna be giant, but, I haven't had a chance to stare at the 18th. I would expect it to be let's call it a normal packet, whatever that looks like.
We'll have a rental inspection ordinance coming back to the council at that meeting, but
Can we push that off?
we can,
Well,
there's
I mean,
no hurry.
Just to set that number is not a,
It's not, I know,
not a big
Oh, I see
thing.
what you're
I
saying,
know.
okay, I thought we
I
wanted
know.
to have a little bit more discussion.
we can certainly have all that discussion and you can have that all the way through, but to set the original
The
percentage is not a.
preliminary,
Yeah,
I
no,
get
I
it.
get it.
We just
I-
need to set
I'd
it
be
high
fine
enough
setting
that
it
we're
right
not-
now, or,
Yeah, we
certainly have to.
Could we set it now?
On the
I
5th.
just-
So we did not advertise that we'd be setting it now.
just-
So you can direct staff, this is where we want it set, and then when we come to the council meeting, we'll just know what to bring you guys.
Then,
If you give say, I don't know if you were saying a different setting than what Josh was interpreting, but like if you all agreed tonight, like this is what you should bring us for the preliminary levy on the 18th, then that's what we'd bring on the 18th. Or are you saying you guys want more time to decide what to set before you say this is what you should bring to a council meeting?
I'll make it real simple. I'm fine if you wanna do it on the 5th. I'm not gonna be here, but I'm very comfortable where the number is and what it will be set, knowing it's preliminary, so.
Okay,
Okay.
I know, and it's
That
not
was
too
nice.
high, but
yeah, that was awesome, thank you, Maggie.
So what is that number then? Because we've talked about
it's
a
gonna
couple
be,
different
I
numbers.
think 6%,
Think
either that or the
6,
5.3.
and then we'll go down from there.
Yep.
Okay.
Because this legislative session, I think is gonna have some goats in it that we're not.
You guys see my new wine, or my new can cooler? What it says in, I used
You
to
know,
have this
I have a
t-shirt.
feeling you said ghosts, but it sounded like you said goats. Like this legislative session's gonna have some goats
Yep.
in it.
Goats or
Ghosts.
ghosts?
It sounded like you said goats.
Never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups.
Okay.
It's got a picture of the Capitol.
So on September 18th then, which is generally when we do our levy, we'll just bring 4 to 6%.
You can do you can do September 5th.
Yeah,
I
September
just said,
5th.
I'm fine.
Setting it September 5th.
Yeah.
And then we can go from there,
Okay,
okay?
It gives you some wiggle room. That's
Yep.
right, yeah.
yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Okay.
Don't take that too literally though, cause I'm sure we're gonna wanna go below
wiggler.
6%.
No,
heard
and like I said, my proposal here is not even scratching 6%. So
Okay.
I don't have no intention of getting up to 6%.
Okay.
Other things on the agenda.
Bruce had one
Well,
question.
just my general comment about the budget, and I think it's a great job putting it together and everything. My inclination is to try to support and advocate for something that's gonna keep the tax rate about what it was last year. So that's my positioning so far on it on the first read. And look at, and part of that comes from just the, not fear, but just like you said, that the residential rates were decreased in Scott County. So we're going through what could be or couldn't be a recession in the next year or two. Is our tax capacity rate gonna hold? No, it went up 500,000 supposedly so far, but we had such a gigantic increase the year before, a very large one.
Yep.
So, and I guess I would ask, trying to ask, to me, the tax rate seems like a very arbitrary number because your value is what you pay in taxes is based more off of what the assessor values your house at versus your neighbor's house. And if everyone's taxes, or if everyone's values go up 20%, it doesn't do anything to the taxes unless the city decides to raise their taxes 20%. Does that make sense?
No, I didn't catch that.
So
No, I just look at my tax bill and I know what I'm paying and it.
yeah,
you know,
so the way taxes in Minnesota are based off of the system, the tax rate itself is a very arbitrary number that doesn't really mean much. If we lived out in Colorado where their tax rate's based on a mill rate, if your property tax goes up 5%, or if your land values go up 5%, then your taxes are going up 5%. Whereas in Minnesota, the levy is based off completely what the council or county commission asks for. So if everyone's taxes or everyone's land value goes up 20%, the council can ask for the same amount of money it did the year before, and everyone's taxes will be exactly the same. And the tax rate will just plummet. So I guess I'm just wondering why you want to try to stick to the tax rate when it's kind of an arbitrary number based off an imaginary valuation. Like, I guess I could see the valuation of commercial versus residential, and if commercial land values are rising, then they're gonna take a larger percentage versus residential rising. But when everyone's residential rates went up 20%, I think I shouldn't say everyone, but last year, our levy was 3.5%, and I believe my taxes went down.
Yeah, and Josh, I'm more looking at it maybe just a little differently or subtly. I'm not sure what a good benchmark, but in my mind, my benchmark that I've been using is our levy divided by the next net tax capacity number.
Yep.
And I call that the tax rate. I realize that's not a tax rate because the way the levy system works is different. If you have a more expensive house and a lower house, and commercial is different than industrial, and all those little intricacies. When I look at the next net tax capacity, I'm looking at the value of all the properties in New Prague, and that's what I call the tax rate. I think that's what they call it at the state of Minnesota.
Well, yeah, and so I mean that is the tax rate, but
my tax rate might not be that. Your tax rate might be different.
No, I guess
Industrial
I
is
guess I was
different.
just commenting on if tomorrow the assessor comes in and says, you guys, your taxes or everyone's land value just dropped 20% for whatever reason, that's not gonna drop anybody's taxes if that makes sense. So if everyone's land value dropped 20%, that's going to probably increase our tax rate by 20% overnight, and yet myself or Ken, or I guess Ken doesn't live in the city, myself or any of you all or Matt,
But it's,
our taxes aren't gonna change. And unless the city council says, you know what, we're gonna ask for less taxes this year, or we're gonna ask for more tax. It's more based off of what the council's asking for, not so much what our tax
right,
rate is.
it's a good discussion because it does change in the sense that you're paying a higher percentage of taxes based on the value of your property.
Correct.
And so if you're taking on a mortgage loan, your property tax, including your payment's gonna be a higher percentage of that payment. What kind of house you can afford is gonna be less. And it's a difficulty in financing and purchasing, and it affects the economic value of it. That's why
Correct.
I'm looking at it that way.
But
It's
yeah,
important,
but I guess to me, that's based more off of the value of, the change in value of my property versus the change in value of your property, and less off of what the overall net tax capacity is of the entire city and the levy the council's asking for.
Well, if you can come up with a better benchmark that I can use, but when I'm looking at the economic growth of the New Prague and what
Yep.
we're trying to do in growing the valuation of our property and what's the tax burden gonna be on those properties, that's kind of the measurement I use.
Yep.
And that's kind of what the state of Minnesota uses, I think, when we go through the charts that they provide.
Yeah, I guess when I would look at it, I would,
And when I compare
Yeah.
ourselves with other community, that's the number I compare ourselves with.
yeah, I guess when I look at it, I would compare that, if I was looking at data myself and trying to compare how that goes, I would be interested in looking at more of the new construction numbers and how have the new construction numbers in the city increased versus the expected levy that we are looking to put on next year. If new construction values have increased our tax capacity by 10% and we're asking for a 6%, well, that means that everyone's taxes are probably going down over the year before, because the new value should have allowed us to go up 10% without any changes. Whereas if we have zero new construction and we increase 6%, then in theory, overall you'll go up 6%. Your businesses will see generally about double the increase of what your residential owners will get off of an increase, just based off of their tax rate is twice the number of what ours is. But I agree there's not a perfect system, but
You can look at it different. I
Yeah.
mean, the cost of providing or operating the city, the services for the community, we can benchmark it. If you want to use net tax capacity, come up with a different one. What's the right number that we can monitor the expenditures of to create these city services? What's a good measurement that we can measure ourselves with and trend line it going forward to see that because what happened a few years ago, the tax capacity went down and, other people,
yep,
it's not a good system. Not everybody goes down, like you say, at the same time.
yep.
Industrial dent and houses, we had to cut a lot of money in the expenses. The city did, rather. So I'm just saying,
So
something to measure it so
Yep.
so we're kind of, the growth in expenses normally, in my understanding, in state government tries to do is to follow the gross domestic product of the government. So if our expenses are going up 5%, is our GDP actually going up 5%? It's not projected to next year, so that kind of makes me wonder.
Okay. Yeah, I can,
But I get lost in the weeds sometimes, so.
that's all right.
You get lost in the weeds?
I took a lot of economics classes. This is the stuff I nerd out
I
on.
don't smoke the weed, I just get lost.
Okay, so then, we got two more items, cannabis discussion and school district discussion.
Yeah, so I
Cannabis
expect
discussion.
both of these will be rather quick discussions,
Yep.
more, hopefully direction for staff. So B, cannabis. Got your pen ready? Cannabis discussion. Oh, I figured. If you read the newspaper last week, I know Elko, Newmark is talking about it. I know that there's a few other cities in the area. I don't think it's been out publicly, so I won't name names at this point. If they haven't, they will be discussing it, both north of the border, north of Main Street and south of Main Street. The potential for what municipal cannabis store could look like. Right now, nobody has any answers. at this point. And I know that, according to the paper, that Elko New Market Council had a discussion and at least would like staff to look into and research what it could potentially mean, impacts, good, bad, ugly, unforeseen, what we can figure out. And I guess my question to you all, is that something you would like staff to spend time on? It is, I know larger cities that I've spoke to seem to be of, well, if we can't have a monopoly on it, we don't really care all that much and aren't gonna spend any time on it. Smaller cities seem to be of the opposite vein. We have the potentially, the way it's written, to monopolize it, which would allow for better compliance control on sales as well as potential revenue if the stores do well. A lot of them look at cities who have well-run liquor stores and see that there is decent revenue that comes from those that help support, whether it's police operations or parks or other stuff that they're able to support from those funds. So knowing that we know nothing basically at this point, and have spent very little resources on this, is looking at a municipal cannabis establishment something that the council would like staff to spend any time on?
So question, so let's say we did just a wait and see scenario, and one of the tobacco shops here in town has decided that they are going to sell, and the license, et cetera, could we at some point in the future say, well, we as a city have decided we're going to open a store as a municipal store and not allow the sale by any other establishment?
So from what I know right now is the city has the ability to, and you'll likely be seeing something in the future as we put drafts together and have future discussions as to, we are allowed to, with, is it 12,500? 12,500 populations, we are allowed to limit the number of establishments to one.
Right.
The state will be doing the issuing of the licenses.
To one or none?
One.
One.
Just to one.
We have to allow one.
Okay.
As far as we are able to understand. Other communities interpret it differently, but from what we have heard from our attorneys, that's what we have to do. Because of that, with the state issuing the licenses, if we decide, you know what, we're just gonna wait and see, and we'll say in 3 years, we decide, you know what, maybe we do wanna open this. Our ordinance says now only one can be open, and it's already being held by someone else. And so I'm not sure what the state process would be to get that overturned versus us. I could see the potential where maybe we decide to limit one and we would like to have a municipal, but one of the tobacco stores in town is also on their game, and we both submit at the same time. The state's gonna choose who's gonna get this. Is it gonna be the city or is it gonna be this other vendor? And I'm assuming the application process would come down to us having to make our case of why we deserve it over them, and they would make their case as to why they deserve it over us, and the state would decide.
So we don't have any.
But I think that we also get to make a recommendation. If we'll say, I think, what do we have, 3 tobacco stores in town?
Two.
Tobacco only stores, 2. If they both submit and we don't submit, from what I can tell from the regulations is it will then come back to us for a 30-day review. And then we as a city would get to make comments on the people submitting to help the state make their decision. And so I would argue that if we have a good case, and I would argue that revenue is not a good case, but if we have a good case otherwise as to why the city should run one and maybe not one of these other third-party stuff, that we would have the opportunity then to make that case. But I would guess that they would have the same case to be able to make as to why they would get to run it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an interesting subject, kind of a tough decision. I think my take anyway, as a city, I would not want to see us get into the business of selling cannabis and all of the potential liability that could mean. Plus bricks and mortar, additional employees to run it. I just think that would be a bigger burden for the city. And I would be more than happy to let other individuals in town secure a license if they wanted to do that, and if our city is going to allow even the sale of cannabis in the city.
So we do have to allow at least one.
At one, okay.
And we're limited to one because we're under 12.5.
We aren't. We can, sky's the limit. If we want to basically, if the whole county of LeSueur County says, well, we have to they think 2, I think it's 3. If they say, well, we have to allow 2, but no one in LeSueur County wants them, we could just have both of them in New Prague and basically take that burden off of them, I guess you could say. The way that revenue sharing from the state comes back is they do share back 20% of the tax revenue back to the localities, county and or cities who have the businesses. And so if New Prague has, if LeSueur says they need 2 and that's how many they need, and New Prague has both of them, then New Prague will see all of the revenue that comes back basically for that allocation. And as far as I can understand, the county and or the cities, the rest of them in LeSueur will not see any. So that's kind of that carrot and the egg. Like if you're willing to allow this, the state will share its revenue with you based on how many you have. If you have 1, you'll get some. If you have 2, you'll get more. If you have 12, the money will flow like milk and honey.
But LeSueur is gonna be limited to 2 or 3.
They can limit. So basically they have to allow at least that many, but the way it's written, if somebody, so if, we'll say if Scott County has to have 10 based off of their population, I'm not even sure what Scott County's population is off the top of my head. If Scott County has to have 10 and 10 establishments open up, anybody else in the county can say no if they would like. If LeSueur has to have 2 and 2 have been opened up, everybody else has the ability to say no. But if the first one comes to, if you want to say, if you're just waiting on La Center for 2 to open, so we don't have to open up any, but 2 applications come for New Prague first, and we don't have any sort of limit, those could be the first 2 that are allowed in, and then the rest of the county would be shut down, unless they want to allow more.
Okay. Do we have the ability to set our licensing fee?
We do.
It's a registration fee. I think.
They call it a registration fee.
Okay.
And it's limited to what, like $500? Like it's specifically
500 or 1,000.
It's specifically written in there so that nobody can basically say, well, we'll allow it, but it's going to be $100,000.
Okay.
Is like it is set like $500 or $1,000 or pretty low, actually, based off of that.
Okay.
It's $1 amount for renewal and 1 for a
Initial
application.
Yeah. Maybe it was $1,000 for the initial, $500 for any renewal.
Well, then I'll chime in. I'm not in favor of having a municipal one, just because there's plenty of smaller communities that have municipal liquor stores that are struggling, or even having to be supported just by having full-time employees, another department head sitting up here in the vacant chair, with all the salary and benefits that go along with that, because I'm sure that would be graded out at a 14 or something. It's gonna be right in your group.
I would assume that it would basically be graded at near department head level.
Right. So, I don't know what that means for cannabis sales, but I mean, it's real easy if it's gonna be everywhere, that on your way home, you can stop next to the gas station when you're pumping your gas and get it. You don't necessarily have to go to New Prague. So I could see, not only to Maggie's point as well, to having a brick and mortar store with all the maintenance that goes along and the air conditioning and the utility bills and whatever else, but then just having the employees run it and a department head managing it, and then an assistant manager and whatever that grades out at a 12. I mean, it's just I could see where it would be a break even at best, and the possibility of actually losing money.
And I think too, it's gonna be new, everything's gonna take off. Everybody's gonna do it, and then, people will get weeded out, because all of a sudden there won't be,
Pun intended.
I don't think you heard.
I never even thought of that. No pun. But they'll, and the strong ones will survive, or the well-managed ones will survive. And I guess my take is, I wouldn't support a muni either.
And I guess when we were talking about as staff, I think the biggest thing we came back to was compliance.
Yeah, I understand.
We do have compliance issues every year with our tobacco establishments,
And then,
basically we'd be entrusting one of them to then not have compliance issues with cannabis.
And then maybe
if it was city run, we'd have more control over that compliance.
I understand that, and then maybe we have to take more of a proactive approach to that, all in all. And, you know, hold up the ordinance 100% and not let, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not, you know,
Again, if I have to be the one that breaks the bad news to people, if a junior high kid's trying to get marijuana, he's gonna get it, and it's gonna be even easier in the state of Minnesota because of what the legislature did. Would you not agree, Tim? I don't think compliance is, you know.
Again, I argue for the compliance piece. At least we're able to control who we're selling it to, right? Wherever people are gonna choose to get it, we can control what happens in the city of New Prague better this way than allowing someone, a third party, to do that. I don't disagree with you. Again, as these retail shops start to open up, we're gonna see more and more of it, so I don't disagree, but I think, again, going back to Josh's point about the compliance piece, giving us that ability, I think is a benefit to us. But I also understand the points about employees and.
I guess we do compliance checks, what, once or twice a year?
Once,
Once, okay.
One for tobacco, one for alcohol.
correct.
Okay.
And maybe we need to ramp them up with tobacco, especially if we get complaints. I mean, but
And we do, I mean, if there are things that are happening that we learn about.
I understand,
yeah.
but then, I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that then if you know, your budget numbers, well, this was, you know, overtime we had to pay for compliance, we shouldn't be sitting here going, oh, chief, you know.
And if it turns out that we have a big problem with this, that number could go way up too, right? If we end up spending
Correct.
a lot of money on compliance checks because it's becoming a problem, are we able to then control that from the city side, or is it just purely by compliance? Right, we're forcing the compliance rather than trying to control it.
Yep.
So let me understand this too. So the most we can charge for a cannabis license is $1,000.
Maybe.
But
It's
maybe,
either 5 or 1,000.
but yet we can charge 2,500 for hard liquor.
We can charge even more than that. That's just what we happen to have for our intoxicating liquor.
That's just crazy.
Some cities charge
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
$10,000.
Right, right. But we have to have a justification for that, do we not? That it's due to compliance?
Yeah,
So-
your actual,
So really, they're limiting us to,
Correct.
to the $1,000 worth of compliance checks.
And in theory, that is why they say they are sharing back the revenue, is because in theory, we'd then use that revenue kickback from the state to assist us with compliance checks.
To assist,
This,
to monitor the thing that they gave everybody the right to do.
Okay.
Instead of using it for new park equipment or,
yes.
Yeah.
yeah,
Can I,
unbelievable.
so then if we'd have a municipal, you say the states still will get 80%, correct?
Well, I mean, so off the municipal, they'd still collect their taxes. We would just also get our kickback at the taxes in addition to, whatever business dealings happened.
On top of the revenues.
On
what you're
top,
saying.
so if if we had a municipal and we broke even,
Okay.
we would there'd still be taxes collected off of what's sold, and we'd still be entitled because we had an establishment in town to some of those.
But if we can make a municipal work, we could make more money. We
Correct.
could.
Yes, if there's the potential with municipal to
I got you
make more
now.
money.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Those municipals, when I first started in 2004, the first thing we did was sell the liquor store. Because it was too much difficulties and employees had a lot, you know. So I don't know how municipal will work. How much difference, I mean, what we could, make off of a municipal type, and we can only charge 500 for the license, which is crazy. Then my next question is really gonna get you guys, but what is the difference between the money we can make? Is there a way that we can, make money off of the sales of it?
Yeah, so I mean, it would be like if we owned so I know that from what I've from speaking to administrators, the liquor stores that seem to work are the ones that are off sale only. The ones that have on sale are the ones that seem to have a harder go of it. But it would be like running a business, and so if we got our product in, we could, if you're running a liquor store, and you're selling bottles of whiskey, we'll avoid any brand names so I don't upset anyone. We're selling bottles of whiskey, and we obtain those for $10 a bottle. As a business, you're allowed to then set what you would like to sell that bottle for, $15, $20, $45. So the money we would make running a business would be based off of our markups on those compared to what we're paying out for insurance and employees and any other expenses your business may have. It would be up to us to set our prices. Our competitors would then be the closest cannabis stores, I guess.
Yeah, that to me, I don't make much sense. And that when there's already a business is established, so would we do it on a lottery basis? Because we only need one.
No, the state's gonna,
The
he
state
said the state's
decides.
gonna pick them. We don't even have
Oh,
any.
so they just can pick?
They can apply and,
They can apply. We as a city are allowed to set a limit. We don't have to if we don't want to. If we want to allow as many cannabis stores as want to open up, we can do that. And then people just make their application to the state, and the state will decide who gets the licenses.
And it's possible too, though, that the state might then set the price for cannabis to be sold.
They may.
It's possible.
Yeah,
I guess
so-
they haven't as of yet, but it
Yeah.
is possible.
Yeah, I don't think I wanna go down the rabbit hole of even considering.
Well,
business.
let me finish up.
Yep.
That was my whole point about this whole subject, is why are we following the governor down the rabbit hole? Is it now, what would happen if New Prague said, you know what, we don't want this headache? We don't wanna allow marijuana in New Prague, let's just make that motion.
Well,
We can't.
Well, we have to allow one store, unless we have to allow one store unless the county
yes.
has their limit and that limit's been reached. Or so the county has to allow, we'll say, at least 10 on the Scott side and 2 on the LeSueur side. If those limits have been reached, we then can say we don't want any.
Right.
But as long as those limits haven't been reached, we have to allow them in with at least one.
Okay, I got you.
I'm done, yeah.
So the chances, I mean, so it
may go.
may or may not.
Giving you my permission.
So the way you're describing it, will we be having to go through two different thresholds, one for LeSueur side of New Prague and one for Scott?
Correct.
So there's potential that we may be required to do two?
I don't believe 2.
We're still
we are still municipality. We can just use limits on both sides. And so if LeSueur if we have to allow one and nobody has applied yet, and we'll say LeSueur doesn't have any, so their tickets are still up to grab, and Scott has met their max of 10, and the applicant comes in on the 10 side, on the Scott side, we can say no. If it comes in on the LeSueur side in that example, we would not be able to say no.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I'm with you guys on it, we just.
Okay.
Well, again, I'm not, I'd rather have the free market run a business than the city. I mean, and a good example is the golf course. We've been losing money on that. We lose money on the food, on the beverage
Well, actually, we make money on the food and beverage.
this year, but I mean, if we looked at
In
the
the
last
past,
25.
it's not been
Well,
good.
Fifties.
No, well, not quite that, because there used to be a waiting list and whatever else from,
I mean, and I guess with that, if you're breaking it down, I believe if margins are correct, you should always make money on the food and beverage. It's just how much you make and does it support the other areas that are potentially losing. But
right,
yes.
right. Though, of the business entity as a whole.
Yeah.
That we run right now, the golf course.
Correct.
We lose money on.
Yes,
So,
I will buy that.
I don't think government ever does a good job running businesses.
No.
And to your point earlier, places that have municipal liquor stores often, or municipal bars and restaurants tend to not necessarily make a lot of money, if any at all, and the potential to lose money for the city and the taxpayer is often the case. So, especially in smaller towns. If you're a Lakeville or an Edina,
That's
I
different.
mean, I think the paper had, there was like 6 or 8 municipals that actually made money. And the money they made was significant. I'm not gonna downplay it. It was millions of dollars, but
And that's where, and I know
They
a
have
lot of those
70,000
larger
people.
cities aren't even looking at cannabis because they can't get a monopoly on it like they can liquor. So I know there's already talks of significant groups of lobbying efforts to try to allow cities to capture that municipal monopoly better, because a lot of the big cities don't even wanna touch it. It's a headache. If we can't corner the market, there's no point in us getting into the market, that type of situation. But
So I guess what I hear for the direction is we don't want city
from what I hear, you don't want us to spend any staff time researching.
Correct, other than what we have to. I
Okay.
mean, cause
Yeah,
we're gonna have to do some.
Yeah, so I mean, our staff time will still look into researching the ordinances of where
Yep.
stuff's allowed and that sort of thing, but we won't spend any time looking into
Chasing the meaning.
municipal.
Yep.
Okay,
I would be interested in if you have the relationships that you'd be able to get the information from Elko, what they determine. I mean, I don't know if they're doing their own study or they're hiring somebody or.
so the initial conversation was if a few of these cities wanna do it, we can all go in together and kind of research as a group to collect this information more easily. So it's gonna be harder to get out,
Yeah.
it's harder to go to them and be like, I'm not gonna participate, but if you could then give me all the information when you're done. But
Yeah, we don't even want the information, let's just,
You make it sound like a bad thing when you describe it.
no, we will not I will say we will not spend significant
right.
Okay.
time
Yep.
on this.
Perfect. School district discussion.
Yes, I just wanted to have a quick discussion. I know the school district is potentially looking at, doing a referendum this year. Knowing that we've got a close relationship with the school district, I just wanted to gauge the council's interest and or disinterest in potentially, supporting and or being against a levy, in any way, whether it is helping them get materials out or outright saying we support this, or just completely staying hands-off altogether. And
my vote's no.
because some of that's as easy as, yeah, we'll share your Facebook posts or whatnot, and I know other communities, city councils have come out for or against levies. I can't remember which one you said this morning, was it you, Ken,
Hopkins.
that told me?
I told you, Hopkins I saw in the Sunday paper.
Came out in support. I'm not saying I support it one way or the other, I just wanted to see if the school district were to say, hey, could you help us get these mailings out? Or could you share this post on Facebook? Or does the city council have a stance on this? How you would like me to reply to those inquiries?
I think that they should handle the communication of the referendum themselves.
I'll second that.
agreed.
Me too.
Okay, we will stay hands off on that.
Yeah,
They're definitely doing the referendum, that's
Well,
been
that's still,
decided.
Yeah, I don't know if it's been 100% decided yet. I haven't been followed this week that close. Matt's our school board watcher.
There was election at the meeting last week.
yes,
That
they
they
talked
determined to
about
do it, and so it is in process.
Oh, it
As
is?
far as the dollar amount and things.
Okay,
like
so it
that.
is, okay, so it is
active.
going forward then.
I would
But-
agree that I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable, I totally support it, and I think it's important to do it. I'm totally supportive of their referendum that they're trying to get passed, but I don't feel that it's a city government kind of thing. It's certainly important from an economic development point of view that we have a strong school district,
Okay.
and from that angle.
Yep, and I just wanted to make sure I gauge it, so we've had that conversation, so we're all on the same page then.
Yeah, they just have their own elected officials and it is encompassing way beyond just the city of New Prague. And the elected officials that the community as a whole voted in, they've made their decision and I get to vote as a resident within that and that's up to me and I don't think, my opinion, I'll let the people make their own choices, so.
I think you have to be sensitive about it, because we have asked the school district for favors for us. On the chart development, we did ask them to tax abate the school's levy, and they were willing to do it, which is not a normal thing. So we've had good cooperation from the school district on things that we wanted to get done too, so I think we have to be sensitive about that.
Agreed, but we also are picking up 70% of the school resource officer to help them in their budgeting process. We pay half of the operating expenses for the community center, which greatly benefits the schools and adds to your overall good school system. So, I mean, we've been good partners, I think.
I agree.
so. Okay, With
Okay.
that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion made by Maggie, seconded by Sean. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
At the middle school at church on Sunday,
What's that? I'm sorry.
at the middle school at church on Sunday, because that's what we need, taking down the signs.
No, I totally agree with you. There should be a